Stop it. Stop it.
Leave
I
it.
knew.
Leave it.
No, I'm leaving it. I'm not going out of this. This is going to be on the internet forever. You hear that, woke mob? He's right here, woke mob. Take him down.
Habibi,
right.
welcome to Church History for Chumps.
Welcome to Church History for Chumps. My name is
Sounded
John
like a
Simon.
Japanese Muslim.
Yeah, it got a little I don't know,
I just gotta...
Shinto near the end.
Church History for Chumps.
Oh, gosh. My name is John Simon. All I was gonna do was say I'm here with Habibi number 1 and Habibi number 2, but Taylor had to do a call to prayer. All right.
Yeah, this isn't. What is this?
It's not just mission. All right. Gosh.
Oh no,
man. What's that place called? It's a little town outside of Detroit. I forget what it's called. Gosh dang it. It's whatever. Yeah, a lot of Muslims there. I think they have a not 8 Mile. Anyways, we'll get to that. We'll get to the Muslim stuff. How you boys doing?
Good. Oh, Dearborn. That's what you're looking for.
Dearborn. Thank you. Yes.
I'm doing just fine.
Yeah.
I'm doing just fine. Dude, we hit our enrollment goals at work today. So that was dude. And
wait, what does that mean? Like healthcare?
No, like our for the seminary, and we had a big jump.
Big, yeah, good stuff.
We basically had a 50% increase from last spring.
Whoa. Wow. Okay.
They set the goals, and I was like, oh no.
How many students are at Gateway at any given time?
That's a fantastic question that I should know.
Is it only a seminary, or is there also a college there?
Yeah, we're just only seminary, and it's hard to say because we have students all over the world. We have people in our advanced program. I think the number is like 1,600 or something. We're the 10th largest right now. I think we'll probably bump up to number 9.
I had no idea it was that big.
Who's 9?
Oh, I'm not going to pull up the ATS report. I don't remember.
Okay.
It might be New Orleans Seminary or RTS. And then all the Baptist seminaries are in the top 10. And then you have like DTS and Talbot at Biola. Their seminary is also cruising up. They're doing good too.
How's Princeton doing?
Terrible.
I'm not theologically, but are people going there?
Also terrible.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
No, I don't think people go there, dude. Because here's the thing: evangelicals want to go to a seminary that's going to. I've talked to one Princeton grad. I saw her at a conference, and she came up to my table, and she was her husband was actually interested in getting his MDiv, and I said, I was talking to her, and she goes, "Well, I already have mine from Princeton." They were Nazarene. There was a lot of Nazarenes at this conference, so I already knew that she was conservative. So I was like, "How did that go?" And she was like, "I survived."
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, "I actually have mad respect for you." That's actually how you do it in the academic world. If you want to sort of, you know how Mike had said when we had him on a couple weeks ago, how Mike had said it's really hard to get into academia. If you go to liberal schools but remain conservative, the liberals will respect you more.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think our boy Pastor John Beeson went to Princeton.
I was just thinking about him. Yeah, and he's also a pretty conservative guy. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's cool to be able to kind of speak the language of both. You know, you're bilingual in theology, but you still know how to call it down the middle.
I don't know if any of us would be able to stomach it for like a whole MDiv. But anybody that can, I have mad respect for. Because you got to think the person teaching your Christology class is most likely somebody that doesn't even believe the resurrection was real. So that's what it's like over in yonder shores.
Yeah.
And then go ahead, tell me.
I think those schools can draw conservatives, and conservatives can survive there if they're already super rooted before they get there. Like, it's not good for like a 22-year-old to roll in, but like, if you're in your mid-30s and you're like super grounded and you're there because of the library that they have, that's kind of a different story.
Or if you're going because you want to get into academics, you want to be a professor, or something like that. I could totally see that being a viable route.
Oh, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, to get a job in the academy, it's all about what you do. And if you go to a respected school, then that bumps you up.
Yeah.
So when it comes time to apply for a faculty position at a conservative school, they're already going to know you. The world is not that big, so they're already going to know you, and then they're going to like, oh, geez, he went to Princeton for his MDiv, or Yale, right, for his MDiv, and then he went, somewhere equivalent like Harvard for his PhD. Like, you're set up for success. It's hard, but you can do it.
Yeah. Geez. Well, we'll get more into that stuff for Chump Talk later. Tommy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing just fine. Enjoying the nice Tucson weather. I think some of our listeners are freezing their heinies off wherever they're at, but
bummer.
It was a nice balmy day here in Tucson, and
couldn't be us.
Yeah, it could not.
Did you wear flip-flops?
I wore flip-flops with socks on. Yep.
Solid. Are you a slides guy or a thong guy?
I don't really call them thongs either, but yeah.
I said what I said. No.
I feel like slides is like who wears slides? Like,
you know who?
Yeah, who wears?
John's
more
of a Birkenstock kind of guy.
Here's the thing: get you a man who can do both.
Yeah, but I feel like like mixed dudes wear slides and it's all right.
Yep. Yeah.
But I don't know, like white guys who wear slides are lazy. It's just in my experience.
Or they've been to prison.
Oh yeah. So it's just they got really comfortable like that. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they got really used to wearing.
They also like pouring nacho cheese in a Cheeto bag and mixing it together with a spoon. And
you seen some of those recipes?
Yeah,
it's like impressive.
They're making like Cheeto sushi and stuff. And
yeah.
Gosh. My favorites are the comments that are just like, homie, you won't have to eat like this anymore.
Yeah, Unk, you free. Unk, you free.
This dude's making ramen by putting some tepid water in a shirt and leaving it in the corner for half an hour.
That reminds me,
mayonnaise and nacho cheese over it.
Did you guys see the Drewski skit this week of him lampooning?
He did. Yeah.
Dude. Okay, you guys listeners, you need to look this up. It's incredible. I will warn you, the last 2 seconds of the skit has an F word in it. The whole rest of the skit is family friendly, but he's mocking in particular, it's like mega church, like kind of prosperity gospel pastors, and Drewski's not a Christian. But what's the guy's name? Mike Todd. I think he's like dressed exactly like Mike Todd, and he's like, everybody asking me why I've got on, but like Christian Louis Vuitton, and what was the
Christian Dior?
Yeah, Christian Dior. And he's like, because I'm covered in. What does he say? Because I've got Christ on me and I'm walking in the blood of Jesus. And he pulls his feet up. He's got the red bottoms.
Yeah, dude.
Oh, no.
It's
and he's
really
just
good.
Suspended in the air, like for no reason.
And there's just these like gusts of white smoke that are just encompassing him the whole time.
Yeah.
It's just
the fall of the church.
Yeah, I don't know. Makes me wonder. I don't know. It's like there's been so much berating of the aesthetic of megachurch pastordom that it makes me really think like, is anyone going to go to these churches in 20 years? Like, or is the whole culture just going to be like, yeah, that's not really it. Because it's just getting blasted, bro. They're making TV shows. I remember when Preachers and Sneakers came out on Instagram and everyone and their mother had to write an article for Christianity Today about that. Like, I don't know.
There's always going to be like a false church out there. It'll just take different forms. But I think that form is going away in the same reason that like younger generations don't really care to go to Vegas to like play video poker. Like it's just whatever the allure was, it's just not. I don't know.
Yeah, every like you said, every culture is going to find a way to tickle the modern fancy. And yeah, that one is.
I saw an interesting Facebook post from Mike Foster where he was doing some warnings against potential issues in house churches.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like the polar opposite.
That was a good post.
Yeah,
dude, I need to check that out.
So it was like it's like he's like addressing the polar opposite of mega churches, where it's people that like don't want any accountability potentially, and it's just like not all mega churches are bad. Not all house churches are bad. Not all normal size churches that like we're at. I shouldn't say normal, as if the other ones aren't normal. Average. But
you can say normal.
Okay. The normal churches that us and all our listeners go to, those churches are Brandy's home. Hello. We're live. It's okay. And they will, there's problems in all the churches, but I don't think that we should just, not be willing to examine something because, they're just a little guy, or, well, how much that church gives to missions. And it's like,
yeah. No, everyone who goes to an out of the ordinary church has a justification for it, and it's not always bad because, like you said, a good healthy mega church. I mean, like there's churches in town where Tommy and I know the pastors where they could probably qualify as a smaller end mega church, but like trust the pastors. I trust what they're doing with their budget. I don't think they're paying for angels' wings to descend from the rafters every Sunday morning.
I think if you have a really good like doctrine of like the Word of God and how God works in people's lives, then you can see how God is working even in kind of broken setups. I was just listening back to the episode, that first one that we did with Ben Lansing, where he told his story about kind of growing up in the house church and how he ended up Anglican. But he spoke, I mean, he did a lot of critique of the house church that he was in, but he also spoke very warmly about it and about how God just protected them and guided them in the midst of their kind of shenanigans.
Mm-hmm. But buckle up, team. We got some stuff to talk about. All right, here's our cold open, ladies and gentlemen. So we're for those of you guys who think that we forgot, we didn't. This is stage 2, or actually we should say part 2 of setting the stage for the Crusades. We've kind of already mentioned that there are 3 main characters, or we should probably say 3 different casts of characters that we're going to be interacting with quite a bit. The first, which Taylor discussed last week, was the Western Europeans, the Latin Christians. And today we're going to talk about the birth and a very, very brief history of like 600 years worth of stuff for Islam, who is the second character along with the Byzantines, who we'll cover next week. So yeah, it's interesting because we're doing some history about a religion that is most certainly not ours. It'd be flattering to Islam to call it a Christian heresy, but it is not. It is a totally different religion. And but as you guys will see, there's a lot of overlap with Christianity, which the Crusades is obviously going to prove. So here we go. Buckle in. If this show was called Islamic History for Chumps, then it would start in the year 610. But because this is church history for Chumps, it starts much earlier. If you're a longtime listener of the show, you likely remember our series that Thomas and I did in the good old days called Hefty Heresies from a year or 2 ago. I'd like you to recall 2 significant heresies to mind: Nestorianism and Eutychianism. The meanings of each are irrelevant right now, so I'm not going to pressure our co-hosts into defining them, but the significant thing is that they led to the first formal and long-lasting schisms in the history of the church. The first was by the Church of the East, which proclaimed itself independent when Nestorianism was denounced, and then the Oriental Orthodox tradition, which includes the Syriacs, the Copts, and Taylor's friends in Ethiopia, who established their independence when they refused to acknowledge the Council of Chalcedon, ironically enough, because they believed it wasn't hard enough on Nestorianism. The common factor of these schismatic churches, aside from theology, is geography, believe it or not, because both of these communities will take up significant presence in what we now call the Middle East, Persia, Iraq, parts of northern Africa. Now, I remember offering a hot take back in the day when we covered these schisms, and speaking like a true hot-blooded American Protestant, I said that these schisms were probably for the best of the long-term health of the church, because they allowed for a kind of theological pressure valve release during a time when division was more about language and culture than about true commitment to the inspired word of God. I argued, sometimes it's better to just split the church if both sides can survive and prosper. And I don't think I completely retcon and take back what I said. However, today is when we really have to consider the long-term effects of what happens when you separate from the larger body of Christ. Namely, that the scattered and fragmented churches in the Middle East did not have either the infrastructure or the evangelistic efforts that the Western Church had, which means that it was incredibly susceptible to outside threat. They lacked the hierarchy, they lacked the deep-rooted tradition, and just the resources of being part of a larger body. When nations like Arabia did have exposure to the Christian church, they were often in the spirit of competition. Some sides were Byzantine, some sides were Nestorian, they were divided, and they were vulnerable. And in the year 610, that vulnerability will truly be exploited by the appearance of a new religion, meant to silence the pagans and unite a people that had been thoroughly divided for generations, uniting them under the true God of Abraham, but in many ways far different from the God of Christians and Jews. This was the birth of Islam. Taylor? Very good.
We got no.
Is that what you wanted?
No, that's exactly what I wanted.
Okay,
no, that was
I had no
perfect.
idea. I didn't know if I missed a cue or something.
No,
Taylor, take it away.
That's exactly what I was looking for. All right, so I'm just going to say there is a lot to get into, and this could be a very, very long episode. So I'm going to have to skim through a lot of it. You guys just jump in and interrupt. I do not mind, because we're going to try to get into both the origin of Islam, but we're going to spend most of our time talking about kind of the development of these Muslim conquests and how it's going to form into these kingdoms and the kingdoms that are going to be relevant during the Crusades. So it's going to be a lot of fast moving today. But the story goes back to 610, when there is this dude by the name of Muhammad, who is often referred to in Islam as the Prophet, a very highly revered figure, receives a message from the angel Gabriel in the cave of Hira, telling him to read. He will contain this angelic figure will continue to appear to Muhammad in all of these different manifestations and ways over many different times, and these sayings will eventually be recorded, not by Muhammad, who was illiterate, but by his companions. His preachings, he's going to basically repeat these words to the people around him, and they will receive it as the word of God. Now, what was the climate of where he was? First off, he's in Mecca, Arabia. When we think of the Middle East, especially me, when I think of like the Syriacs and the Byzantines, I think, oh yeah, there were definitely Christians there. But Arabia was kind of unique in that Christianity, when it did exist there, was often in pockets. Arabia was just kind of by its nature a very tribal and very segmented group. So when you look at a place like Syria, where Damascus is and a lot of these big historical strongholds for Christianity, Arabia never really has that. Even when Christians are around, they're not really having that big impact. So there's pockets of Christians, pockets of Nestorians, pockets of Orthodox, pockets of Zoroastrians and pagans, basically. So this is why what we'll see when we get into the early teachings of Muhammad is that it's about unity. It's about bringing the people together for the first time to stand under the one true God. That's the one thing that Islam loves to repeat. It's the one God. That's, if you ever talk to a Muslim about Christianity, one of the first things they're going to criticize is the idea of the Trinity. How can you believe in the one true God if you also believe that God is reflected in three unique persons? That's a whole thing for them. So yeah, they're going to be a big religious site for them is the Kaaba, which is this big black rock. That's a religious site. That's also where they perform the Hajj, which is one of their 5 pillars. We'll get to that in a second. The word Islam means submission, specifically submission to God. He's going to preach in Mecca for a while.
The Black Rock is that thing that's got like the arena built around it.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's massive, and apparently that was actually a pagan site for worship that was co-opted by the Muslims. So yeah, but yeah, if you can look up pictures of it, you'll usually see pictures of it with all the Islamic pilgrims around it, all wearing their white robes and such. He is going to preach and kind of get a little following for a while. Eventually, his teachings are not well received in Mecca, so he historically flees to Medina in 622. He'll continue to have revelations. Again, I'm flying by. If you guys want to get more into detail, there's a lot of resources about this. He's going to kind of stir up the Medinans who are going to receive Muhammad and his teachings, and then they're going to kind of go back to Mecca and avenge him a little bit. And after the Medinans have this battle with the Meccans, eventually all of Arabia will acknowledge Muhammad as God's true prophet and accept his beliefs.
He kind of this is the story of early Muhammad reads like just somebody's like RPG that they're playing, where it's just like make up a religion, get rejected from the city that you're living in, so you go somewhere else and you make like 10,000 followers and then go back and like sack the city.
Yeah, dude, it's kind of crazy. Looking at it from a bird's eye view is, yeah, kind of a wild experience. Like I think even the more secular historians would say that there's a lot of influence that Islam takes on, not just from Abrahamic religions like Judaism and Christianity, but also just from like straight up paganism at times. But go ahead, Tay.
Oh, I can talk now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
What I was going to say was, from my understanding, in Mecca, he was being a little more peaceful. And then he wasn't getting any traction. And then he went to Medina, and got more revelations and then started preaching more war. And then everyone was like, yeah.
Yeah, that could very well be true. So the first like generation of Muslims is very interesting because there's this like, so to summarize a very complex idea, very simplistically, you can't be super violent and attract people to come together because these are already tribes who are known for rivalries and infighting and stuff like that. So on the one hand, you have to be peaceful, you have to speak of justice and bringing the community together in order to get a following. But then once you get that following, that's where you decide who's not your neighbor, and then you kind of go to war with them. So there's always like this mixture of like what brings us together, but then also what brings us against this guy who we
I think that's what makes Islam like one of the most successful religions in the history of the world, because it's different than, I mean, it seems like it appeals to sinful man in a way that other like conquesting civilizations or nations in history have, like really, really brutal cultures like the Assyrians or the Mongols. But those in particular, I'm thinking like the Mongols, it's a little bit more about just destroying everything in its path, and it doesn't necessarily have that cohesive layer that can be put over it of like, this is a comprehensive way of life as well. And so Islam has the capacity for being extremely violent, but it is more about world domination. World domination, if you're not stupid, doesn't actually involve killing everybody. Like you gotta have something left to dominate.
Yeah, and I think like when I look at how the different dynasties approach things in Islam, especially in this first like 5 centuries or so, it reminds me a lot of like the different Roman dynasties in the early Roman Empire. Like there are some emperors who are all about expansion and military, and there are some emperors who are all about let's maintain what we have, let's develop the culture, because like there's a whole dynasty that's going to do all of the conquesting, and they're going to be one of the most successful military conquests in world history in terms of what they conquered in how short a period of time. But the dynasty that follows that, they're just
the
vibing.
Umayyads you're
It's
talking
the
about?
Umayyads. But the Abbasids who come after them, they aren't really that interested in conquest. That's like the golden era where they're going to really sow into things like literature and artwork like that's kind of when what we know about the Islamic contributions to mathematics and philosophy, like the building of the Library of Baghdad, like that's where all that's going to come from. So yeah, there's definitely a foundation of systemic violence, but depending on who's in charge will influence how forward they are with it, is what I would say. All right, so brief recap of Islam when it comes to its beliefs. So there is 5 pillars of basically what a Muslim is to do, and then there's the 6 articles of faith. 6 articles of faith are: you believe in one God, which, like I said, big thing for them. You believe in angels, which is important because an angel was the one who revealed the message to Muhammad. You believe in the prophets, specifically that Muhammad was the last and final prophet. You believe in the revealed scriptures, you believe in the coming day of judgment, and you believe in God's divine destiny. Those are the main tenets of Islamic faith. The 5 pillars of faith are the declaration of faith. They have a very almost like sinner's prayer element of, as long as you can admit that there is one God and he is the God of all creation and that Muhammad is his prophet, then you can be a Muslim. And it's not quite that simple, but they say it's that simple. So there's the declaration of faith. There is the act of prayer. They pray 5 times a day, facing east to face Mecca. They believe in almsgiving, which is giving to the poor. It's a very crucial part of their faith. Only 2.5% of their assets go to the poor. So I don't know, Christians do 10. They believe in the holy pilgrimage, which is when it's a thing that even to this day is practiced, which is that every practicing Muslim man should travel to Saudi Arabia to visit the Hajj and pray there, and they have their own routine and stuff like that. It's encouraged that everyone who's physically or mentally able is able to do that. And then fasting, specifically during Ramadan, which is one of their holidays.
One thing I'll mention on that that's been interesting to me as I've been doing my study is that declaration of faith, the Shahada. One reason why Islam is able to spread really quickly, also in conjunction sometimes with conquest, is, from what I understand, they're not like Christians when they're looking at converts. Like, we get the heebie-jeebies a little bit when we talk about like Charlemagne or any sort of kind of forced baptism or anything like that. But in Islam, from what I can tell, it doesn't really matter. Like, if you say the Shahada and you submit to Allah, even with your mouth, like they're not necessarily as concerned about like, oh, did that person really mean it or whatever, because it's more about the external.
And as we'll see, a lot of the conversions to Islam are going to be a lot more politically motivated than necessarily a pious religious act. Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Okay. I mean, so first off, your wife sounds like she's having a great time, John Simon.
Gosh dang it. All right, I'm going to text her.
Don't
carry on.
Let her party it up.
All right, I thought you were being snarky right now. I'm sorry.
I was just poking fun of you. She's
I mean,
fine.
she is having a good time. All right, carry on. What were you going to say?
So this is my issue with the way a lot of the missions work. And you mentioned Charlemagne, and we talked about Clovis, and there's every story about every Viking that ever turned to Christ. The thing is they might genuinely convert, but then they turn around and then look at their whole country or their whole population of people that they're in charge of, and they go, now it's your turn. Get in the water. And it's kind of the same thing.
It depends. I mean, on the one hand,
I think that's a stretch, but yeah.
I think like
a forced expression of faith.
But here's the thing. They're doing it voluntarily because their like tribal chief or their chieftain is doing, like, that's the relationship that they have. Like, to them, choosing as an individual was a different vibe.
Yeah, and in those cases, it's also followed up with discipleship. It's not like it's just like, okay, we got you to say the thing, and like that's all you're ever gonna hear. Like, that results in a lot of genuine conversions.
Yeah.
But it's not. So you're saying that they didn't, as Islam spread and took over, they say the thingy, and then they weren't concerned about trying to make sure that they had support to live out the.
I don't know if I can say that. I mean, I do think that there are certainly times in Christian history where having your community convert to Christianity was just a way of saying you were cool with a political power, and they weren't really like all about. So I don't think it's unique to Islam that sometimes it was just a political move, but I can't say if they were like discipling people. I mean, like they would have certain, they would maintain enough control to where, you know, if they do I mean, this is a totally modern thing, but if you do a call to prayer and you don't acknowledge that in a place that is overseen by Muslims, then, you know, that's problematic. Again, I'm actually kind of blowing smoke. I don't know if that's accurate. But
I would just say the reason why I'm pushing back on saying that they're the same thing is because the baptism, for example, is a sacrament instituted by the true God. And when the sacraments encounter like a tribal culture, they actually still work, just in a way that perplexes our kind of modern Western mind, whereas the Shahada is doesn't have the power of the Holy Spirit wedded to it. And so we might say, hey, that's not an ideal missional approach, but it is efficacious in ways that actually save people.
I will 100% concede that I get, like, there was definitely people in these mass barbarian conversions to Christianity that, like, legitimately their like heart was softened, right? And they're doing like X, Y, and Z the right steps in going through with it. And there's no salvation to be found in Islam. So
exactly, yeah. And
I guess I see the difference.
I know that's not what you meant. I'm just wanted to like paint that out a little bit.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. But again, like converting to shake hands with the higher powers is not unique to any religion. It's human nature to say what you need to say to you know, shake hands with somebody in power. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. You guys will like this though. So the first reference to Islam by Christian writers is a little excerpt by our boy Saint John of Damascus, who was a Syrian Christian. And he was, I don't think he was a contemporary with Muhammad. I think he was maybe a generation or two after that, but he's the first Christian to write a polemic. I mean, not like other Christians were writing like flattering letters, but he wrote about Islam in basically a book that he wrote, just listing through a bunch of heresies. And he talked for a long time about
this would also be the first non-Islamic writing about Islam, period, probably.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure, because they were pretty close to a lot of different cultures and such. I wouldn't be surprised if someone else had written something, but yeah, I have this excerpt for you guys, and it might have just been the translation that I found online, but I just love how freaking snarky St. John sounds in this, so I'll read this. Speaking of Muhammad, he says that the Christ is the word of God and his spirit, but a creature and a servant. Is not the word of God and his spirit, but is a creature and a servant, and that he was begotten without seed of Mary, the sister of Moses and Aaron. For he says the word of God, he says the word and God and the Spirit entered into Mary, and she brought forth Jesus, who was a prophet and a servant of God. He says that the Jews wanted to crucify him in violation of the law, and that they seized his shadow and crucified this. But the Christ himself was not crucified, he says, nor did he die, for God out of his love for him took him to himself into heaven. And he says this, that when the Christ had ascended into heaven, God asked him, "O Jesus, didst thou say, I am the Son of God and God?" And Jesus, he says, answered, "Be merciful to me, Lord. Thou knowest that I did not say this, and that I did not scorn to be thy servant. But sinful men have written that I made this statement, and they have lied about me and have fallen into error." And God answered and said to him, "I know that thou didst not say this word." There are many other extraordinary and quite ridiculous things in this book in which he boasts was sent down to him from God. But when we ask, and who is there to testify that God gave him this book? And which of the prophets foretold that such a prophet would rise up? They are at a loss. And we remark that Moses received the law on Mount Sinai, with God appearing in the sight of all people in cloud and fire and darkness and storm. And we say that all the prophets from Moses on down foretold the coming of Christ, and how Christ, God and incarnate Son of God, was to come and to be crucified and die and rise again, and how he was to be the judge of the living and the dead. So he's basically like, you got a book? Cool. Did anyone else see you get this book? Did anyone else see these angels? Like, he's just like, this is dumb. This is silly.
So was he saying that Muhammad was teaching that Jesus of Nazareth did have some divinity, but it was more like, it sounds like more like how we would talk about like King David having the spirit, like the spirit of God came upon him.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't researched this recently, but there are Muslims who would say that Jesus was the savior of the world, but they would not appoint him God status. So yeah, I mean, they're like, if you ask a Muslim, they'll say that they heavily revere Jesus, but they feel like it would be an insult to God to say that a man could become God, or vice versa.
Can I like tell the 2-minute version of that story we heard on Pints of Aquinas? I feel like that's relevant.
Yeah, sure.
There's an episode of Pints of Aquinas with Matt Fradd with a guy who he grew up in a household where his father was Muslim, and then he ended up converting to evangelical Christianity, was baptized, and then he ultimately becomes Roman Catholic, which is why he's on Pints of Aquinas. But he's talking about reading, his dad ends up getting cancer and is dying, and in his dad's final weeks, he's reading him the Gospels, because I think Inspiring Philosophy pointed this out in our episode with him. Like the Christian scriptures are kind of like canon for Muslims. They're allowed to read them, the Gospels, I think, in particular. And so he's reading him the Gospels, and he gets the story of the prodigal son, and he's reading this story, and his dad is convinced that the way the story is going to end is the father's going to come out and meet the prodigal son on his return and then stone him to death right there on the front lawn. And he hears how the story ends with the father embracing the son and forgiving him of his sin and welcoming him back in and throwing a feast. And it like breaks his dad, and scales fall off his eyes, and he becomes a Christian, and he's baptized, and then like a week later he dies. Really, really cool story.
Yeah. There's some amazing, some of the coolest testimonies you'll probably ever hear are from Muslims or people in heavily Muslim countries who either have visions of Christ or hear about Christ. Like they're really, really amazing, really supernatural stuff. It's crazy. But all right, so that's a little bit of background about the faith itself. After Muhammad dies, his first successor will be his father-in-law by the name of Abu Bakr. And pretty soon after, so this is the thing that takes all of these Arabian tribes and people groups who belonged to a number of different religions, some of them Christian, some of them pagan, some of them Jewish even, and just unites them all and says, we are united under this one God. And suddenly the Arabian nation is united in a way that it hasn't been basically ever. And they do what people during that time tends to do, which is they think, well, we're big and strong now. What can we do to all these other bums that are also big and strong? And so in the course of, I don't even know the number of years, and I'll be wrong if I guess, but in the course of a very short period of time, especially under Umar, who's the second caliph who succeeds Abu Bakr, they're just going to expand and expand and expand. And it's because they know the desert well. They're trained warriors, and they're kind of in their comfort zone, and they're attacking a lot of local enemies who are weakened by their own kind of conflicts. And they're just not expecting the Arabians to suddenly produce this like formidable force. I read a historian who said that the only army that's conquest could be compared to the success of the early Muslim armies were that of Alexander the Great. Like that is how effective these dudes were at just like.
And this was
running
3
stuff.
generations removed from Muhammad, you said?
No, dude, this was like 10. This was like 10.
Wait,
yeah,
so they had a quick turnover in leaders.
Yeah. Let me see. I'm gonna pull that up real quick because that's a really good question. So yeah, because the first caliph, the first like dynasty, is gonna be 4 dudes who I'll get into in a second. But yeah, they're all gonna lead from 632 to 661, and 632 is when Muhammad dies. So within 30 years and this is all 30 years right after Muhammad dies, is when they're gonna blow up like crazy. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah. So when Muhammad dies, his first successor is his close friend and father-in-law Abu Bakr, is succeeded by Umar and then Uthman. Both of those two will be very involved in the military actions of their growing empire. I mean, here's the thing, guys. We're a Christian podcast. It is not difficult to speak. Like it would be easy to be like, oh yeah, a bunch of dorks. These guys are terrible. Here's the thing. I genuinely believe history speaks for itself. History speaks for itself. And the story for me, just as a person reading and researching about this early history of Islam, it just makes me think of nothing but he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Like it just seems like while there are moments of God's common grace that can transcend, it's just a violent time. Like Abu Bakr, I think, is the only one of the early caliph's leaders who's not going to be assassinated. Umar will be assassinated. Uthman will be assassinated. Ali, who is a very significant leader, is the nephew of the prophet, and he will attempt to mitigate a civil war that's happening in his midst, and he will also be killed, this time in battle. Ali is really significant because if you know, Muslims, even to this day, are divided in 2 camps, the Sunni and the Shia. The Sunni are the majority. They're about 80%, and they're the ones who are going to say, yeah, you know, the original successors to Muhammad were all legitimate, and this is the way that Muhammad wanted it to be. They're like the mainline Muslims. The Shia are the ones who say that the first 3 caliphs were all completely illegitimate. The only legitimate one was Ali, because Ali was the true flesh and blood of the prophet. And the Shia have this very interesting approach to Islam where they have a heavy emphasis on kind of like apocalypse and eschatology and the return of the 12th Imam, which is kind of like, it's sort of like this Jesus returning figure in Christian terms, but he's this prophet who will return and bring about fiery judgment. And so even in terms of like culture and understanding of the purpose of Islam, the Shia and the Sunni will always be at odds with each other, and they do not like each other. I mean, I read stories literally on Reddit of like Shia Muslims who go to Hajj in Saudi Arabia getting like mistreated and like spit on by the Sunnis because Sunnis don't like Shia Muslims. So a lot of that. Okay. So
some of those assassinations, by the way, are like not exactly the, you know, assassin in the night kind of stuff. It's more like Julius Caesar, like bludgeoned in front of your friends kind of hostile takeover.
Dude, there's some like Genesis in the Old Testament assassinations that happen here. Like there's one I'll talk about, which is, I'm not gonna say it's not sick like it's cool, but it's sick like this is an action movie scene basically. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, Shias and Sunnis are never really going to like each other. The Shias are always going to be underrepresented and the minority. And the bummer for them is that even when are going to pretend to speak out in their interest, they're almost always used as political pawns. And even in the example of one of the overthrows we're going to see, they're going to shake hands with the Shias and be like, we're here to help you guys out. And then they're going to stab them in the back. So the Shias have a huge chip on their shoulder. And I think even to this day, that is true. One of the like villain origin stories for Shia Muslims came during the Battle of Karbala, which was when the Shias led an attack against the Sunnis, and the Shias were led by a dude named Hussein, who was the son of Ali, which meant he was the grandson of the Prophet, and the Sunnis killed him. And they were like, how could you kill like the blood of the prophet? Like, this is awful. Like that to them was like, now we know we're right. And now we know that you guys are a bunch of freaking heretics. So gosh, yeah. How did these armies succeed so well and so quickly? The simple answer is that they were taking territory from the Byzantines and the Persians. And these two giant armies had just spent the last 20 years beating the crap out of each other. And so when they got surprised by a brand new opponent who they'd never seen unite before, they just weren't prepared for it. That's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's kind of some parallel to Taylor's episode talking about the Germanic tribes converting to Christianity, where you have like in different parts of the world that were near each other, which is going to come into play. You have on one side these like warring tribes. They're like well acquainted with war, very willing to be violent. These guys become Christians, which doesn't automatically make them not warlike, but it starts to temper things. And you see their leaders oftentimes be genuinely converted, and you see the fruit of regeneration in their lives, and it's kind of starting to change that part of the world in a way. And then in another part of the world around the same time, you have these warlike peoples who also are converted, but to a religion that is like pouring gas on that violent fire and is drawing them together.
That's an interesting parallel to draw, because you're right. The barbarism kind of calms down over time in Europe, and for these guys, it like ramps up to level 10,000.
For a time, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed some similar. I too was kind of like, let's see. So you get a bunch of rambunctious tribes and unite them under a religious cause, and you drive them into conquest where they kill a bunch of people. I was like, oh, we're not so different, you and I. This is interesting. But I mean, there's definitely some differences, which we'll get into more. All right. Politics. Here we go. The fun stuff. One way to understand the progression of politics, and specifically political upheaval that will bring us to the Crusades, is through a term called a fitna. And a fitna is an Arabic word which means like an upheaval or revolution. Fitna is also a word that Thomas used in high school when he was about to do something.
Stupid. I knew that was coming, dude. As soon as you said fitna, I was like, there's a joke coming.
Got you, brother. Hey, yo, I'm fitting to put on some 5-Iron Frenzy. Y'all cool with that? All right, so we have the first fitna was when Uthman, who I already said was the third caliph, was killed because he was playing favorites to his Umayyad tribe. That's when Ali was installed, and that was a whole mess. The second fitna was the Battle of Karbala, which we already talked about. The third fitna was, actually, I'll get to that in a second. The Caliphate, the dynasty that took over after the Rashidun, which was the one that we already spoke about, which ended with Ali and all the craziness there, was the Umayyads. And the Umayyads is when these armies are basically going to do all the expanding. And the phrase that everyone uses, from the Atlantic to the Indus, like the Indus Valley in like India and Pakistan, like that's the freaking range of like territory that these dudes were able to capture. And that's going to happen mostly under the Umayyads. The Umayyads were very unique because they were big on hereditary succession. They were very Arab-centric. They heavily favored Arabs, specifically Arab Muslims, in pretty much everything that they did, which became more and more problematic as they expanded and were taking on non-Arab and even non-Muslim nations and people groups. They ran their rule out of Damascus in Syria, so that was kind of like this center of the empire for them. Very successful in terms of military conquest. The problem with the Umayyads that kind of developed over time is as they were expanding, their rule over non-Arabs, non-Muslims, and even Muslims who weren't Arab was just starting to chafe on people. Like the Shia did not like them, the non-Arab Muslims didn't like them, the non-Muslims didn't like them. And so there's basically like kind of this rally where they're like, dude, we're sick of these guys. They're jerks. They're playing favorites to only Arab Muslims. Let's do something about it. And so this is where the third fitna comes in, which brings about the Abbasids. And the Abbasids is a relevant word because these guys are still going to be around during the Crusades. They're going to be a big player. So the Abbasids, part of the overthrow, and this is the crazy story that I wanted to share. So when the Umayyads were overthrown, all of the leaders and relatives of the Umayyads were slaughtered. And then they eventually found some of the relatives who were hiding, and they said, listen, we're not here to make a big fuss. You guys already survived this long. We want to pardon you as a show of good faith. So we actually want to have a banquet and just, we can eat, we can break bread, and we can just show that we can live in solidarity with each other.
Tale as old as time.
Tale as old as time. And when they showed up to the banquet, they just killed them all. And then, but here's the kicker, they still had a banquet. And so they just set up tables and just ate over their bleeding, dying bodies.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so the dude who orchestrated that was nicknamed Bloodthirsty, which I think accurate, solid name. One of the questions that often comes up when it comes to Islamic expansion is, what is the relationship of Muslims to non-Muslims? Because there's a big conception of like they were forcing conversions, and I think there's a mixed bag of what that looks like, especially in the first few centuries. But I remember hearing an argument from one of my college professors way back in the day, and he's basically like, one of the things that they did to non-Muslims is they would tax them. And so it's like, why would you want all of your people to suddenly become tax exempt by forcing them to convert to Islam?
Yep.
So
that's a really good point.
It was a common practice. Thank you, man. Not that I said it, but they kind of stole the practice from the Persians, who were mostly Zoroastrian, I want to say, where they basically said, when we overtake a city, as long as they're cool and they're not going to be punks, we'll just let them do what they're doing. So if they're Christian, we'll let them be Christian. If they're Zoroastrian, we let them be Zoroastrian. If they want to convert to Islam, that's on them, because to convert to Islam means you no longer have to pay basically a foreigner tax. It means that you can ride a horse. Yeah. It means that you can join the military and that you can own arms, which were, I would imagine, they forbade those things because they didn't want a revolt to be staged. So, yeah, they were basically trying to do. Yeah, they did not have a problem overseeing people who were not Muslim because they just charged them more money and they just used them for that.
It's kind of like a lot of gangs where it's like they like violence, but they also like money.
Yeah, it's like never-ending violence is not sustainable. Like you need people to keep things afloat, and you have to keep people relatively happy.
And you also lose goodwill with violence.
Right.
I think that it seems like the history of Islam, especially in these early centuries, is not necessarily never-ending violence. It's consistent violence, but it's not limitless. What marks it standing out is how brutal it is when it's present. Like really, really, really brutal. Like if they are going to go through and just like kill everybody in a city, the way they go about it, rough. Like
Yeah. So the Abbasids were the first to prioritize proselytizing, but their main strategy was basically they would show up and they would actually utilize the religious leaders, because kind of like Taylor said in the episode from last week, nobody may have known who their chieftain was, but everyone knows who their bishop was. So basically, when a Muslim army would take over, they weren't quite crossing paths with bishops yet, but let's just say for the sake of saying, they would show up and say, hey, who's your bishop? Oh, it's this guy over here. Okay. Hey, so you guys are going to fly our flag from now on, but hey, you can still hold mass, do whatever you want to do. Here's a couple new rules for how society is going to be run. But aside from that, do whatever. Just don't cause a fuss. And honestly, like I said, this was very Roman. A lot of the Romans operated this way, even when Christianity was young.
The big point is, and the tax collectors will be here next week.
That's right. Yeah, and we'll be here to get your money for sure.
Yeah. This is like a dovetail to that. I think it was Mike Goheen who pointed this out for the first time. He comments, I think oftentimes the kind of the Western conception of Islam is that it's like this Eastern, it's almost like an Eastern religion, or it's like super different than Western. But Islam in some ways is a Western religion too. Like there is tons of influence of Greek thought in the Quran, in just the way you see Islam developing. It's not all that different of a starting framework than it's not like it's this I mean, there's some serious pagan elements that are concerning, but it's not like it's this total backwater thing. It's actually got some Western DNA in it.
Well, and like I didn't do a ton of research on this, but I already mentioned that during the Abbasid Caliphate, this is what's called the golden era of Islam. So they've got all this land and all this money to where they can be comfortable. And the Umayyads were more bloodthirsty than the Abbasids. The Abbasids just like, let's just chill, dude. Let's just make sure what we have is good. And so this is when they're gonna pour into the arts and the building their libraries, but also, like you said, Tommy, this is when they're going to start translating classical literature, and this is when Greek and Latin influence is going to start coming in. So it would not surprise me, since this is kind of like their scholarship era, this is when they're going to start grappling with the Quran and the Quranic texts through this lens in a very similar way that the Christians had kind of done with Aristotle and Plato.
It really is just like an Age of Empires campaign, man. They start off, you go, you destroy that little village that snubbed you, and then before you know it, you're building your university and your temple, and you're advancing the technology tree.
That's right.
That's right.
They hit the castle age. I'm going to go ahead and guess that, what was this empire called? The
Abbasids.
Abbasids. I'm guessing the Abbasid Caliphate. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that those aren't the ones that we deal with in the Crusades.
They are, believe it or not, because they inherited all of the wealth and territory from the Umayyads, so they're still giant and pretty freaking powerful too. As is, and I listened to a professor historian say this, and he said the greatest existential threat to Islam has and always will be Islam. Like the thing that kills them more than anything is internal fighting. And we already talked about these Shia Muslims and how freaking big of a chip they have on their shoulder. Eventually, in the early 10th century, the Fatimid Caliphate is going to come up, and they are going to finally be the first real contender for the underdog Muslims, and they're going to push back against the Sunnis in the Abbasids. And they're going to kind of they're going to start in like Tunisia, like northern Africa, and they're going to kind of camp out in Egypt. So they're going to have a lot of Egypt's territory, and for a season they are going to own the Levant. So basically the promised land. But they're going to be like still the little brothers, but rivals to the Abbasids.
So the world, like you have the Abbasid Empire that seems like they could potentially be nice little friendly allies with the Western world, but this like super radical, violent subsect starts growing. So is it what leads to like the events that necessitate if the Crusades were necessary? Remains to be seen. We'll discuss that, won't we? But the events that lead to the Crusades happening is like this collapse of the Islamic world.
Well, I think a lot of historians would say that the reason the First Crusade, spoiler alert, was successful for the Europeans was because the Muslims had spent the last few decades fighting with themselves. And so the Fatimids are going to be, and the Fatimids aren't even like radical, super violent. Like I said, they have a chip on their shoulder and they don't like the Sunni older brothers, but they're going to do the same thing that the Sunni are doing. They're just trying to get territory, to establish resources, to build industry, all the stuff you do in Age of Empires, I guess. I've never played it. So they're gonna push back. They're going to have Jerusalem for a season. And then the last, and this is really probably the last thing I have to talk about, which is the third major party to talk about as we get to the Crusades, which is the freaking Seljuk Turks. So these were, and like I really thought these guys were interesting. I listened to like a 4 or 5 part series on the Mongol Empire by Dan Carlin from Hardcore History, and it's like the greatest 16 hours of my life. But dude, the Seljuk Turks remind me so much of the Mongols. Like they're a nomadic people, they're a horseback people, they're super good warriors. They like to do that one war tactic where they pretend to retreat, and as the enemy follows them off, they have like all these other forces that will come in and just like just swallow them whole. Like super good at warfare. So the Seljuks are super interesting. They show up and they kind of want to make allies. They're like, well, we need some friends out here. So they link up with the Abbasids and they become Sunni Muslims. And the theory that I read about was that the reason, and this is again why some people are joining Islam, not because they really give a rip about Mecca or Muhammad or the one true God, but because they just want pals. They just want politics because they are trying to expand their own empire and their own growth, and they don't want to do it independently. And what was interesting was the Seljuks were a very ancestor-driven kind of pagan religion, and one of the things they would do is they would smoke a lot of mind-altering drugs. And while Islam is very hard against alcohol, they'd had no prohibition for good old hashish. And so that was like,
wow.
Okay, we can be Muslim then. That sounds good. The
so
historian
were the
who shared
Seljuks like the attack dogs for the Abbasids?
Yeah. So they basically became like the mercenary class.
So you have
not that the Abbasids didn't have their own armies, but they definitely used them as the attack dogs. Yeah.
So you have your nice little like artsy fartsy society doing, advanced calculus and staring at the stars and graphing out. And then things start getting rough, and then you just happen to have the nastiest, meanest kids on the block be like, "Can I be your friend?"
Well, dude, and this is the best part because the Muslims in Baghdad, they really don't even vibe with the Seljuks at all because culturally they're super different. They realize that they're pretty fake in their religious devotion, and like they're just rowdy and loud and kind of barbaric, and they get drunk all the time and they're smoking all this weed.
Yeah, dude.
So they hate these guys.
It's like if you took some kid from Harvard who's just trying to like get through his bachelor's, and you're like, you're gonna go live with your cousin Tyrell in Compton.
This is the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, basically.
Yes. Gosh, this is okay. This is amusing. All right.
So, dude, it's fascinating. So, the Seljuks, kind of on behalf of the Abbasids, are going to retake Jerusalem and get this. I think it was like 1078. So, all of this time leading up to the Crusades, you've got the Fatimids who are trying to fight Big Brother Abbasid. You've got the Abbasids who, like Taylor said, are just kind of chilling, doing advanced mathematics and drawing sketches of the constellations. And then you've got these like kind of nomadic crazy dudes who are smoking weed and getting drunk and killing people really well. And so you've got these three very distinct factions, all of whom are supposedly united under Islam. The Seljuks are kind of being used by the Abbasids. The Fatimids hate both of them. The Abbasids really don't like the Fatimids. The Seljuks really don't like anybody, but they're being political. And the Abbasids don't really respect the Seljuks. Crusaders are just like, hey, yo, I want Jerusalem back. So
if they didn't sick the Seljuks on Jerusalem, we might not even have had First Crusade.
It'd be a very different story because the Seljuks destabilized the area. And I mean, this is something that I haven't researched well enough, but I would imagine that the rule of Jerusalem under the Seljuks was probably different than it was under the Fatimids. And maybe that was an influence as to why Pope Urban had such a
Did the what's the name of the one that used the Seljuks?
The Abbasids.
Did the Abbasids give them Jerusalem?
I think they kind of had like a working agreement that they would, because I don't think the Seljuks, I'm a little confused about whether the Seljuks were officially a part of the Abbasid Empire or if they were kind of given, they're like, all right, as long as you guys keep your stuff Sunni and you don't, mess with our stuff, then you can do your own thing. So I'm not actually sure. That's a really good question.
I'm going to talk about it some next week when we talk about the Byzantines, but I'm 99% sure, if I don't have my notes in front of me, but the stuff that the Seljuk Turks were doing in the Eastern Empire to Eastern Christians is certainly going to come into play to why you see the response from Pope Urban.
Sure. All right.
I think another thing that's worth noting in this episode, out of honor for them, is to talk about the plight of North African Christians, in particular Coptic peoples. But just because of geographically where Islam starts, the North African Christians immediately are the first people that they conquer, and Coptic people, basically for the majority of Christian history now, have been under the thumb of Islam.
Yeah, they
right up to this very day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there's still Coptic people around today is a marvel. We owe them a lot of honor in history, and even in
Meanwhile,
well, dude,
Ethiopia, they're like, they cannot get over the mountain.
Dude, those God raised those mountains for those
Ethiopia
people.
just unmolested for 2,000.
Yeah. I mean, like, when we really don't even think about the scope of just how much influence they had. But I mean, I've been studying Spanish for a while, and I learned that, like, there are literally words in the Spanish language that come from Arabic. Why? Because freaking Spain was occupied by Arab armies for several centuries back in the day.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, we just maybe it's because our grasp of the Arab ethnicity is very, like, kind of locked into impoverished Islamic nations in the modern world, which is true. But, like, I mean, when you think about the Ottomans and the Moors, and then all of the caliphs that come from this area, like, I mean, I think I read something that, like, if it weren't for the Mongols basically destroying like everyone who wasn't, like, but before they collapsed, the world would look very, very different. And, like, the Arab dynasties were freaking
So the
bosses.
Arab dynasties were also affected by the Mongols?
Oh yeah. This is later.
Wow. But because remember, the Mongols forced or it was the Huns. No.
Yeah.
What was
the Huns?
What was the
first.
one? The Huns. Yeah, the
With
Huns
Pope
went.
Leo.
Well, and just forcing the barbarian tribes of Germania to have to relocate and move around.
Mm-hmm.
Dang. So the Huns and the Mongols, like, single-handedly have shaped world history by just conquering and
just
then
killing a bunch of people. And I just looked this up. Yeah, the Mongols are the ones that destroyed Baghdad. They like Baghdad, we tend to think of as, like, the place your uncle got stationed 20 years ago. That was like a pit of desert, but it was a massive cultural hub in the world for a very long time before it got basically turned into what it is today.
Wow.
Yeah. Job, all right. I'm exhausted, bro.
Dude, covering this large swath of history is not easy.
So thank you, man. Thank you. Job. Yeah, this was fun. Yeah, this was a good little launching point. So, all right, gang. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This is just step 2 of 1,000 steps.
That's right.
I'll be back next week where Tommy's going to walk us through the story of the Byzantines, and stay tuned for Chump Talk soon. Talk to you guys later.
God bless you.
Bye-bye.